1. The car. Nobody asked her about the design studio on the ninth floor of Meridian Automotive's headquarters smelled like marker ink and cold espresso, and Maya Chen had always loved it for exactly that reason. It was the smell of work that mattered, the particular combination of effort and obsession that settles into a room when someone has been in it long enough to stop noticing the hours. Maya had stopped noticing the hours approximately 2.5 years ago, somewhere around the third complete revision of what she had started calling, privately and only in her own notebooks, Project Sienna. Project Sienna had begun as a sketch on a Tuesday afternoon in October, on the back of a printed agenda for a meeting she had already stopped paying attention to. A long silhouette. A roofline that dropped in a way that felt inevitable rather than designed. Rear quarters that tapered into something that suggested speed without performing it. She had folded the agenda into her jacket pocket and redrawn the sketch properly that evening at her kitchen table, and then again the following morning, and then again, more carefully, in the dedicated sketchbook she kept locked in the left drawer of her studio desk. She had not shown it to anyone at Meridian for 6 weeks. This was not unusual for Maya. She had a particular working process, one that her colleagues found alternately admirable and frustrating, in which she developed a design concept entirely privately until it reached a state she considered structurally sound, not finished, not polished, just honest. She needed to know that the idea could hold its own weight before she introduced it to the particular atmosphere of a corporate design review, where every line got questioned and every proportion got committee voted into something safer and less interesting than what it had started as. She had been at Meridian for 3 years by then. Long enough to understand the rhythm of the place, which ideas got championed and which got quietly shelved, which executives actually looked at designs and which just looked at slide decks, and where, in the organizational chart, the specific gravity of credit tended to settle after a successful project. She had watched credit settle in the wrong places twice before Sienna. She had made a note of it both times. On a Wednesday morning in December, she brought the sketchbook to a one-on-one with her direct manager, a mild and carefully non-committal man named Daniel Park, who had the professional habit of saying interesting in a tone that communicated absolutely nothing about what he actually thought. She opened to page 14, the elevation view, the one that showed the roofline at its most articulate, and set it on the desk between them. Daniel looked at it for a long moment. "Interesting," he said. "I want to develop it into a full concept," she said. "Proportional study, material direction, interior language. I think it has enough to justify a presentation to the VP." Daniel tilted his head at the sketch the way a person tilts their head at a painting they're not sure they understand. "It's very specific," he said. "Yes," she said. "That's the point." He told her he would think about it. She thanked him and went back to her desk and opened her laptop and did something she had decided to do 3 weeks earlier, before the meeting, before Daniel's non-committal interesting, before anything official had happened at all. She filed a copyright registration with the U.S. Copyright Office. Not a patent, that would come later, once the design was further developed and she had decided how to proceed. For now, a copyright registration on the design drawings themselves, the sketches, the elevation studies, the proportion diagrams, the interior concept thumbnails. Everything she had produced in her own time, on her own equipment, at her kitchen table, and in the corner booth of the coffee shop 2 blocks from her apartment where she went when the studio felt too loud. The registration number was VAU1502118. The date was December 14th. Her name was the only name on the form. She saved the confirmation email in a folder she labeled admin and went back to work. Over the following 4 months, Project Sienna moved through Meridian's development pipeline with a momentum that surprised even Maya. Daniel presented it, with her, initially, and then increasingly without her, to the VP of Design, then to the Chief Design Officer, a sharp and expansive man named Robert Vance, who wore expensive watches and had a talent for making other people's enthusiasm feel like it had originated with him. Vance loved the concept. He used the word visionary in a meeting that Maya was not invited to attend. He greenlit a full development budget in February. By March, the project had a new name, the Meridian Aura. and a dedicated team of 12 people, and a presentation slot at the North American International Auto Show in Detroit, 7 months away. Maya was listed as a contributing designer, not lead, not originator, contributing. She read the project brief 3 times. She checked the organizational chart on the internal platform. She sent Daniel one email, precise and without emotion, asking about the attribution structure for the public presentation. He replied 2 days later. Attribution for products developed within Meridian's design studio reflects the collaborative nature of the process. Happy to discuss further if helpful. She did not reply. She opened a new browser tab and began researching design patent applications. She had 4 months before Detroit, and she had already started counting. 2. Detroit. The North American International Auto Show occupied the entirety of Cobo Center for 11 days every October, and on the morning of Meridian Automotive's press preview, the hall smelled like new upholstery and ambition and the particular nervous energy of several hundred people who had been preparing for this moment for the better part of a year. Maya arrived at 7:15 a.m., 45 minutes before the Meridian presentation was scheduled to begin. She had dressed carefully, a dark blazer, clean lines, the kind of outfit that says I am supposed to be here without saying anything else. She had a press credential on a lanyard around her neck, obtained through a contact at an automotive design publication she had quietly reached out to 3 weeks earlier. Not as a journalist, as a source. She had sent them 3 things: her original sketches with timestamps, a brief factual account of Project Sienna's development history, and a copy of her USPTO design patent application, filed 6 weeks ago under number USD 987441. The publication had thanked her and told her they would be watching the presentation with interest. She found a position near the back of the press gallery, behind a row of photographers with long lenses trained on the covered vehicle at the center of the Meridian stage. The cover was a deep navy, Meridian's corporate color, pulled smooth and ceremonial over a shape that she recognized the way you recognize the handwriting of someone you have known for years. She recognized it because she had drawn it. Robert Vance took the stage at 8:02 a.m. in a charcoal suit and the kind of measured confidence that comes from having rehearsed something enough times that it no longer feels like a performance. He spoke for 4 minutes about the future of automotive design, about Meridian's commitment to pushing boundaries, about the courage it takes to build something genuinely new. He used the word vision 3 times. Then he pulled the cover off the aura. The room responded the way rooms respond to things that are genuinely beautiful. A brief collective pause, the kind that happens before applause, when something has landed somewhere deeper than the surface. The car was exactly what she had drawn at her kitchen table 2.5 years ago. The roofline, the rear quarters, the proportions that suggested speed without performing it. Under the Cobo Center lights, it looked inevitable, the way good design always does when it is fully realized, as if it could not possibly have been any other shape. Maya stood in the press gallery and watched, and did not move. Vance gestured toward a large screen behind the vehicle, where a series of design sketches appeared. Development drawings, process imagery, the visual story of how the aura had come to exist. She watched the sketches cycle past. Some she recognized as the studio team's work from the development phase. Some she recognized as her own, redrawn by other hands, slightly altered in proportion, but unmistakably descended from the pages of the sketchbook in her left desk drawer. "This is the work of Meridian's world-class design team," Vance said, "and it represents the best of what this company is capable of." He did not say her name. She took out her phone and photographed the screen. Then she photographed the car. Then she put the phone back in her pocket and stood quietly while the applause continued around her. On the way out of the hall, she sent 2 emails. The first was to the automotive publication. It contained 4 words: "Presentation complete. You can proceed." The second was to a patent attorney named Claire Hoffman, whom she had retained 6 weeks ago and with whom she had filed U.S. Design Patent Application Number D 987441, covering the ornamental design of an automobile as shown and described in 17 sheets of drawings, all of which bore Maya Chen's name, all of which were dated between October of the previous year and the following February. a timeline that began 14 months before Meridian's own internal design brief for the Aura had been written. I attended the presentation, she wrote to Claire. Everything was as expected. Please proceed as discussed. She walked out into the October morning, the Detroit sky low and gray and indifferent, and found a coffee shop 2 blocks from the convention center. She ordered an espresso. She sat by the window. Outside, automotive journalists were filing out of Cobo Center with notebooks and cameras, already writing the first draft of a story that was about to become significantly more complicated than any of them currently understood. She drank the espresso and waited. What arrived in her inbox 48 hours later was something that would make Robert Vance cancel 3 scheduled interviews and close his office door for the first time anyone at Meridian could remember. 3. The letter. The USPTO confirmation arrived on a Thursday morning, and it did not arrive quietly. Claire Hoffman had been a patent attorney for 14 years, and she had a particular talent for timing, not in the dramatic sense, but in the precise procedural sense of knowing exactly when a document carries the most weight and ensuring it arrives at exactly that moment. She had filed the notice of Maya's existing design patent registration with Meridian Automotive's legal department at 9 a.m., 47 hours after the Detroit press presentation, when the company's PR team was still managing the wave of automotive press coverage and the executive team was still in the warm aftermath of what they believed had been an unqualified success. The letter was 3 pages. It was addressed to Meridian Automotive's general counsel. It referenced U.S. Design Patent Application Number D 987441, filed by Maya Lin Chen, covering the ornamental design of an automobile as depicted in 17 sheets of technical drawings. It noted the filing date. It noted that this date preceded Meridian Automotive's internal design brief for the Aura by 14 months, preceded the project's formal development phase by 11 months, and preceded the Detroit presentation by 15 months. It requested, in formal and courteous language, that Meridian Automotive cease and desist from any further public display, commercial use, or production activity related to the Aura design pending resolution of the intellectual property claim. It was CC'd to the automotive publication that had been sitting on Maya's story for 48 hours. The publication ran the story at 11 a.m. By noon, 3 major automotive industry news sites had picked it up. By 2 o'clock, it had reached the general technology and business press. By 4, Meridian's PR department had issued a brief statement. We are aware of the claim and are reviewing it with our legal team, which is corporate language for we were not prepared for this and we need time, and had begun canceling Robert Vance's scheduled afternoon interviews one by one. Inside the building, the reaction moved faster. Meridian's general counsel, a careful and experienced woman named Patricia Lowe, who had been with the company for 9 years, read Claire Hoffman's letter twice, pulled up the internal project documentation for the Aura, and then sat for a long moment with the particular stillness of a person cross-referencing 2 timelines and finding that they do not align in a comfortable direction. She called Daniel Park at 10:15 a.m. She called Robert Vance at 10:32 a.m. She called the CEO, a man named James Whitfield, who had been in a budget review and had not yet seen the letter, at 10:51 a.m. James Whitfield read the letter in his office with the door closed, which was notable because his door was almost never closed, and asked Patricia 2 questions. The first was about the work-for-hire provisions in Maya's employment contract. The second was about the filing date on the patent application. Patricia answered both questions. The first answer was somewhat reassuring. The second was not. Maya's employment contract contained a standard work-for-hire clause. All work produced in the course of employment, using company resources during working hours, belonged to Meridian Automotive. This was standard. This was expected. This was, in isolation, a reasonable corporate defense. The problem was the filing date. The copyright registration, VAU-1-502-118, filed December 14th, predated Maya's first formal presentation of the concept to Daniel Park. The design patent application, USD 987441, had been filed on the basis of drawings that bore creation timestamps from October through February, all of which predated the Aura's official project brief. Claire Hoffman's letter included a technical appendix prepared by a forensic document examiner, confirming that the metadata on Maya's original digital files was consistent with the claimed creation dates and showed no evidence of alteration. Patricia Lowe set the letter down and looked out the window at the Detroit skyline for a moment. The work-for-hire clause covered work produced in the course of employment. If the originating work, the concept, the proportions, the fundamental design language, had been produced before the formal project existed, before any company resources had been allocated, before any brief had been written, then the clause's application became, at minimum, legally contested. And legally contested in the context of a design that had just been publicly unveiled to 500 journalists and was scheduled to enter production in 18 months, was a very expensive place to be. She called Claire Hoffman at 2:45 p.m. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. Patricia was professional and measured. Claire was professional and equally measured. They agreed to a preliminary meeting the following week to discuss the parameters of the claim. They agreed, mutually and without drama, that public statements from both sides would remain limited pending that meeting. After the call, Patricia walked down the hall to Robert Vance's office and knocked on the open door. He was sitting at his desk with his laptop open and the particular expression of a man who has spent the afternoon reading things he did not want to read. "How bad is it?" he asked. She sat down across from him and set the letter on his desk. "The filing date is the problem," she said. He looked at the date. He looked at it for a long time. Outside his office window, the Detroit sky had gone fully dark, the city lights beginning to assert themselves against the early evening. Somewhere across town, in an apartment with a clean kitchen table and a sketchbook in the left drawer of a studio desk that she no longer had access to, Maya Chen was making dinner and not checking her phone more than was necessary, because the things she had set in motion were moving on their own now, the way well-constructed mechanisms do when you finally let go of them for. What the filing date meant. The preliminary meeting between Claire Hoffman and Meridian Automotive's legal team took place on a Tuesday in a conference room on the 31st floor of a downtown Detroit law firm, with 4 attorneys on one side of the table and Claire on the other, and a stack of documents between them that represented, in aggregate, approximately 3 years of Maya Chen's professional life. Maya was not in the room. She had asked Claire before the meeting whether she should attend, and Claire had said, with the particular economy of language that comes from long experience, "Not yet." So Maya was at a coffee shop 4 blocks away, the same one she had found the morning of the auto show, and she was working on something new. Not a car this time, but a chair, a form study she had started in the margins of a legal document 2 weeks ago and had been unable to stop thinking about since. She had a sketchbook open on the table. She had an espresso going cold beside it. The morning light came through the window at an angle that turned the page warm and gold, and she drew without hurrying, because the meeting was Claire's territory, and she had learned, over the past several months, that her particular skill was not in rooms where people argued about things, but in rooms, or kitchen tables, or corner booths, where things were made. Inside the conference room, Claire opened with a timeline. It was a single-page document, cleanly formatted, that laid out 14 key dates in chronological order. The first entry was October 3rd, the date Maya's original digital sketch file had been created, confirmed by forensic metadata analysis. The last entry was the Detroit Auto Show press presentation. Between them, the copyright registration in December, the patent application in April, Daniel Park's internal project brief for the Aura in March of the following year. 4 months after the copyright filing, 5 months after the first sketch. The Meridian attorneys had seen the timeline before. They had been living with it for 10 days, but seeing it presented across a conference table, printed and ordered and unambiguous, had a different quality than reading it on a screen in one's own office. Patricia Lowe's second chair, a younger attorney named Marcus Webb, who had been assigned the work-for-hire research, set down his pen in a way that was not quite perceptible, but was perceptible enough. The work-for-hire argument had not improved with time. The doctrine covered work created within the scope of employment. The question was scope, specifically whether a design conceived independently, before any company brief existed, using personal equipment, on personal time, fell within that scope. The answer was not straightforward, and in intellectual property litigation, Not straightforward meant expensive and slow and unpredictable, which meant that the 18-month production timeline for the Aura was sitting in the middle of a legal uncertainty that no automotive manufacturer with shareholders and suppliers and a Detroit press launch already in the public record could comfortably sustain. Patricia had done the math. She had asked the production team to do the math. The tooling commitments alone represented $23 million in sunk costs. The supplier contracts were signed. The marketing campaign was in pre-production. If the IP claim resulted in an injunction, and Claire's letter had made clear that an injunction was among the remedies being considered, the production disruption would run into 9 figures before the first appeal was filed. She had presented this analysis to James Whitfield the previous Friday. He had listened without interrupting, which was unusual, and had asked at the end, "What does she want?" Patricia had said she didn't know yet. That was what the meeting was for. So now Marcus Webb slid a single page across the conference table toward Claire. It was a preliminary settlement framework, not an offer technically, but a framework, which is what you call an offer when you want to retain some negotiating flexibility. It proposed a formal co-authorship attribution for the Aura's design, a licensing agreement under which Meridian would hold production rights in exchange for a royalty structure tied to units sold, a public statement acknowledging Maya's foundational contribution to the vehicle's design language, and a reinstated role at the company, senior design lead, with a revised contract, if she wished to return. Claire read it without expression. She made one small note in the margin of her own copy. "I'll present this to my client," she said. "We'd appreciate a response within 2 weeks," Patricia said. "You'll have one," Claire said. The meeting ended at 11:40 a.m. Claire walked 4 blocks to the coffee shop and sat down across from Maya, who closed her sketchbook and looked up. Claire set the framework document on the table between them. Maya read it. She read it the way she read everything, carefully, completely, without hurrying. When she finished, she set it down and looked out the window for a moment at the Detroit street, the ordinary Tuesday morning traffic, a delivery truck turning a corner with the slow confidence of a vehicle that knows exactly where it is going. "The royalty structure," she said. "The percentage." "Negotiable," Claire said. "Then let's negotiate," Maya said. She picked up her espresso, found it cold, and set it back down. "And the attribution, I want it in the product documentation. Not just the press release, the actual vehicle documentation." Claire wrote it down. Outside, the city continued its Tuesday, entirely unaware that in a coffee shop near the convention center, a woman with a sketchbook was quietly, methodically, determining the terms under which her name would be attached to one of the most talked-about automotive designs of the year. She had drawn the car. Now she was writing the contract that would say so, permanently, in language that would outlast any press release or corporate announcement or carefully worded CEO speech. And somewhere on the 31st floor of a downtown law firm, Patricia Lowe was already drafting the call notes. Because when James Whitfield asked, as he inevitably would, how the meeting had gone, she needed to have a very specific answer. Ready 5. Credit. The settlement was signed on a Thursday, 6 weeks after Detroit. It was not announced with a press release, which was unusual for a company of Meridian's size and public profile, but was entirely consistent with the particular kind of resolution that both sides had agreed to pursue, one that was complete and legally binding and public in the ways that mattered, without being theatrical in the ways that didn't. Maya had not wanted theater. She had wanted documentation. She got documentation. The formal agreement ran to 31 pages and covered 4 primary areas. The first was attribution. Maya Lin Chen was to be credited as the originating designer of the Meridian Aura in all product documentation, owner's manuals, design history materials, and official company communications referencing the vehicle's creative development. The press release that Meridian issued that Thursday afternoon, brief, factual, carrying the particular tone of a statement that has been reviewed by multiple attorneys, confirmed her role as the vehicle's founding designer and announced the licensing agreement under which production would proceed. The second area was the licensing structure. The royalty percentage had taken 2 rounds of negotiation to reach, and it was the part of the agreement that Maya had spent the most time on, Not because the money was the primary concern, though it was not irrelevant, but because the percentage was, in contractual language, a permanent acknowledgement of the design's origins. Every unit sold would carry a number that said, in the precise and unambiguous grammar of financial agreements, that this vehicle came from somewhere specific and that somewhere had a name. The third area was the patent. U.S. Design Patent Number USD 987441 remained in Maya's name. Meridian held a perpetual exclusive production license. The distinction was technical but not trivial. The car existed in the world because Meridian built it, but the design existed in the world because Maya made it, and the patent was the document that said so in language that a court would recognize. The fourth area was the role. Senior design lead, reporting directly to the CDO, with a contract that contained an attribution clause she and Claire had drafted themselves, specific language guaranteeing that any design work she produced in her capacity at Meridian would carry her name in the project record, regardless of how the public presentation was structured. She had read the original work-for-hire clause that had been used against her. She had understood exactly which words created the ambiguity that had allowed her contribution to be subsumed. The new contract closed every one of those gaps. She had returned to the 9th floor on a Monday morning 3 weeks after the settlement. The studio smelled the same, marker ink and cold espresso, the smell of work that mattered. Her desk was where she had left it. The left drawer was empty. She had taken the sketchbook when she left, and it was sitting now on her kitchen table at home, the last page still half finished, the next page blank and waiting. She had brought a new one. Robert Vance stopped by her desk that first morning, mid-afternoon, with the slightly adjusted posture of a man who has recalibrated his understanding of a situation and is proceeding accordingly. He said the aura coverage had been remarkable. He said the attribution story had generated significant industry attention. He used the word important in a way that carried more weight than it usually did in his usage. Good design should have a name, he said. Yes, she said. It should. He nodded and went back to his office, and she turned back to the new sketchbook, and the studio settled into its particular rhythm around her, the sound of work being done by people who had been at it long enough to stop noticing the hours. On the window ledge beside her desk, she had placed one small thing, a printed card, the size of a business card, with the patent number on it. USD 987441, her name, the filing date. She had laminated it herself on a machine in a copy shop near her apartment on a Saturday morning before any of this had resolved, when it was still just a number and a date and a belief that documentation was worth more than argument. It still was. Outside, the Detroit sky was doing something that Detroit skies do in November, going dark early, the city lights coming up fast against the early evening, the streets below moving with the ordinary momentum of a city that does not slow down for anyone's particular story. Maya opened the new sketchbook to the first page. She uncapped a pen. She made one line, long, considered, following some interior logic that she couldn't have explained but didn't need to, because explanation came later, after the thing existed. The line became a curve. The curve suggested a form. The form was the beginning of something that didn't have a name yet, but would. It always did.